A similar strategy would be to now build a retargeting audience based on, the people who watched 75% or the people who clicked to the next level.
Well, hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Rock Your Brand podcast. I'm your host, Scott Boker, a serial entrepreneur on a mission to help you. This show is designed to teach you, to inspire you, to motivate you to take massive action and build a future-proof business. So, whether you're just starting out or taking your existing business to the next level, this is your home. Now, if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's rock your brand. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Rock Your Brand podcast. This is episode 948, and today I am fired up because, well, I've got a great guest, and he's actually a good friend of mine. His name is Nick Loper, and he's been on the show before, but a while ago. And something really big happened that made me say, you know what, Nick, I should probably get you back on the show because number one, I'm curious, but also I want to highlight this because I think you delivering content consistently over 7 years is paying off. He hit 15 million downloads and he has been able for years now to leave his own job. And really now he is the host and the reporter, if you will, on interviewing people that have created successful side hustles that have turned sometimes into full-time hustles. But sometimes people are just looking for a little bit of extra money. And that's what he really highlights over there at Side Hustle Nation. And it's been 7 years that he's been doing it. So basically, I wanted to get Nick back on the show and I wanted to catch up because him and I haven't talked in a while. Well, we texted a little bit, but really getting face-to-face, sitting down. The last time I sat down with him, we were eating pizza together in Texas. So that was a lot of fun, but a lot's happened. And so I thought having him come on, dig in, him and I geeking out a little bit on podcasting type stuff, but more importantly, what it's been like. What are the ups and downs? How did you stay consistent over 7 years of publishing content? I mean, I'm always telling people about consistency, about showing up, about committing. This is another great example of that. So guys, that's what we're going to be talking about here. We're going to be interviewing Nick. Actually, we're just going to be jamming him and I, and you're going to be listening in, but you're going to have some takeaways here. And the big one is consistency and commitment. Now, this is episode 948, like I said earlier. If you want to go grab the show notes, go through all of the things that we discuss, watch the video, that'll be embedded there as well. If you're listening to this on the podcast, then head on over to brandcreators.com/948 and you can get it all over there. All right, guys, so I'm going to stop talking so we can listen in on this conversation that I have with my good friend, Nick Loper. Enjoy. All right, Nick Loper, what is going on, man? It's been a while. It's been like 600 episodes since I last talked to you. We just figured that out. What's up, man? How you doing?
Oh my goodness. It's been too long, Scott. Thanks for having me back.
Oh my gosh. I remember, where were we that we had pizza together? Was that at FinCon?
That was FinCon in Dallas, 2017.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's crazy that it's been that long, but yeah, we had some amazing pizza together. That was fun. Got to meet in person. And I kind of missed that pizza too. That was good pizza.
That was a good spot. I miss going to like in-person events. I mean, that's kind of been the biggest bummer about it. Even like for, introverted old Nick who, likes to sit in his, little corner of the room and do his thing. I do find I get a lot of energy from hosting meetups and going to these conferences. And it's kind of like an idea brain dump where I kind of relied on that to get my, year's worth of homework or 6 months worth of homework and ideas, and then go back to the cave and execute on that stuff. So fingers crossed we can get back into that this year.
Yeah, I know. I was going to ask you a little bit about that because I know you were pretty active in certain events. I know FinCon being one of them. And just, it's just been a crazy year. So I definitely want to dig into that. But the reason why I wanted to get you on, number one, we haven't talked in a while. I mean, we communicate through text every now and then, and we'll catch up. I see some Instagram stuff that you're posting with your kids and all that stuff, and it looks fun. But I seen that you posted that you hit a milestone, 15 million downloads on the podcast, the Side Hustle podcast. And I'm like, that's awesome. I got to get Nick on because I haven't had him on in a while, and I want to hear what it's been like to get to that milestone because it's not easy. I know. So yeah, man, congratulations on the 15 million downloads.
Well, thank you. It's one of these numbers. Like, is there really any difference between 14,999,
Yeah.
and that 15 million? But it's a nice little milestone, and it's been 7.5 years in the making as
Yeah.
well. So it's not an overnight thing. I was looking back at the chart for the first few years. It was probably almost a couple years before it was hitting 1,000 downloads a day consistently. And so it's
Okay.
just this consistent slog of getting through those days and kind of having the dumb persistence to push through, because to me, those numbers were big at the time, right? It's easy to look back and say only. And even my son, I was trying to he said, oh, we only got to watch like one show or something yesterday. And I was like, you need to remove only from your vocabulary. You're lucky you got to watch a show.
It's true.
It's kind of fun. And actually a podcast movement in Chicago, I was in a talk with Cliff Ravenscraft, and he had a listener or an audience question. It's like, well, I'm only getting a couple hundred downloads per episode. And he was like, stop right there. You need to remove only from your vocabulary. Look around at this room. There's 200 people in this room. Could you imagine, getting up and talking in front of these people every time you get in front of the mic? Like, that's an incredible privilege. I feel the same way with the podcast.
Totally.
Just all these little, it's easy to get caught up in the stats and the little spikes on the chart, but it's like, oh, those are actual people. And it's kind of the frustrating thing about podcasting is the analytics aren't very strong. And so it's really, it's very much an anonymous medium. Like, you'll never hear from a lot of these listeners percentage wise. And so it's always cool when people do reach out and say, oh, I took action on this. And I'm seeing these types of results. Like, oh my gosh, like that definitely gives me the fuel to keep going.
Yeah. I think the whole numbers thing, right? Like, I think as you enter into the online space, we start to hear about numbers, right? Whether it's revenue numbers, whether it's email subscribers or listeners or viewers. But I think you bring up a really good point. These people are people. Like, it's a person, right?
Yes.
And put 50 people in a room. Like, if you could have the attention of 50 people that you knew were aligned with your market and they were going to listen to you every time that you decided to hit record, would you do it? And most people would be like, yeah, because 50 people in a room, that could get tight. That can get tight.
It's very cool. I think you're right. It's like the, how big is your list? That's like the online marketing equivalent of, well, how much can you bench? It's kind of just like this measuring stick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as you mature too, I think I don't want to say it's a maturity thing, but it kind of is. It kind of seems like when you're new and you could be a 40-year-old person coming online and you're new, you're like immature at this stage, and then you're maturing and you're learning. It doesn't really matter. It's kind of like the article there. I forget who wrote it. You probably know the True 1000 Fans, that post that's been circulating around. Like, that's so true. It's like, find those true 1,000 people and you're set. Right.
Yeah. That's the Kevin Kelly post. He was I think founding editor for Wired. He talked about 1,000 true fans. If you got 1,000 people who pay attention to what you do, they support your work. And his metric was like, they support your work to the tune of $100 a year. That's a 6-figure business. And however much time you want to dedicate to that and grow that. I mean, it's hard to measure, right? Who is a true fan, but over time, your following tends to grow. People resonate with what you're putting out there and they share it around. I think that's probably because I would love to, geek out about podcast marketing and stuff like that. Sure. But really the wild card in all of it is word of mouth. Like, think about how you've discovered new shows. It probably wasn't from going to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and searching some keyword. I think, sure, play the ground rules, like lay yourself a good foundation and include the keywords that give yourself the best chance there. But it's word of mouth. It's like, how do you create something that's worth sharing? That's hopefully too good not to share. Because I've definitely had that experience listening to some other shows, or I'm out walking the dog or driving in the car, I'm at the gym or something. And, whenever there comes a good stopping point, it's texting friend like, hey, you got to check this out. Like, it's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also, like you right now, right, you're coming on as a guest. That is going to help you get more listeners, because people that are listening to my show might be like, I want to see what Nick's up up to, or I want to see this side hustle thing. I don't maybe want to do a full-time brand yet, or I want to see like some of these ideas for starting a side hustle. And then they're going to lead over because they're listening to you. That to me is something I could probably do a better job on, to be quite honest with you, is like actually actively trying to get on shows more. Like that would be time better spent, in my opinion. And I'd like your feedback on this, because we could talk back and forth about like what type of promotions, are worth it. What are worth experimenting with? Because there's paid, you can do even paid spots on, what was it? I've seen a couple of platforms where you can do paid spots for like a certain number of potential listens, but then subscribes and all of that stuff. And then you got
That's
Facebook
interesting.
ads. Yeah. I forget the name of it. It was like is it, oh gosh, I'm going to blank out now. Like, there's a few of them out there, but basically,
Okay.
yeah, and it's not cheap. Like, I mean, I guess if you knew your numbers, if you had a back end funnel and all of that stuff where you could lead people in and they could become part of your audience, and you knew that people that became part of your audience would, whether join, a paid group or whatever, then it might make sense. But if you're just doing it for downloads, it doesn't make a lot of sense in my eyes.
Yeah. I've seen some of these, if you're trying to go through, like if you got some money to throw at your podcast, like, hey, I'm going to advertise for new listeners. I've seen metrics between like $5 and $15 per new listener, per new download, which, like, for a single listener, like you said, you really got to have this back end funnel dialed in. Because if you're relying on traditional advertising and you're selling ads at even $30-$40 per 1,000 downloads, you're going backwards in a hurry there.
Yeah. And that's the thing you got to look at, right? And like, I have not, as of yet, I have not run any paid ads to the podcast. Zero.
Yeah,
now you haven't either, right?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Now I'm not opposed to it, right? And so the one thing I was thinking about, and I'd like your thoughts on this. And again, this is like you and I catching up and kind of talking about podcasting. I do want to dig into some of the struggles as you were coming up, and kind of how you pushed through those when the numbers weren't where they were, and kind of how you even made it still worth it in your mind to continue to do it. Cause I think that's a big one. So let's dig into that here in a minute. But, I've been thinking about Facebook ads are very, very inexpensive for like video views, right? So to build up video views it's pretty good. And I've been looking into that a little bit more, even just for our workshops that we do and stuff, to where you can and you're not even pitching, you're just delivering a piece of content. And then you can gauge it for like, okay, people listened or watched it for 25%, 50%, 75, 100, whatever, or even just 10 seconds, 15 seconds, but literally pennies on that. Now, does that mean that those people on Facebook are going to go over to your podcast and listen? Maybe not, but they're still being introduced to your world. What's your thoughts on that? Like taking some good pieces of your content and then putting them out on Facebook, but then leading people over to subscribe to the podcast.
That may be an interesting way to go, to try and get in front of people with a value first type of proposition. Yeah. And then what I've seen some people do following a similar strategy would be to now build a retargeting audience based on, the people who watched 75% or the people who clicked to the next level. Because now it's like, well, at least they're somewhat of a warm lead. They're familiar with you. They're familiar with your brand. And so maybe you wouldn't be paying, $15 per listener or per subscriber at that point.
Right. Yeah. And I've been doing a little bit of that recently, not for the podcast, but for getting people that are in. So I've got 2 new workshops, actually 3, but 2 of them that I'm actively promoting in a sense. I have an email list building fast track workshop, which is like a 3-hour workshop. It's paid. Currently it's $37. And really it's my like fast track workshop series. So this way here, people can get the education they need for that one task. And then hopefully down the road, they might want to join the academy. So just to be totally transparent with my audience, like that's what it is, right? But I'm delivering an immense amount of value for 3 hours on a workshop that you're going to learn how to do this one aspect. But now what I'm doing is I'm running, I do these coffee talks in the morning, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And I'll take like a little, not even a little, but sometimes like a 15 or a 20-minute segment of that. That's right to the point though. Like I'm taking out the like, hey, welcome, Erica, thanks for coming by. Like I'm getting rid of all of that. And I'm running that as a video view on the back end. So people that are in it, it's probably, I'll just give you an example, something like 3 mistakes when trying to create your first digital product, right? And that was
Okay.
the episode. So now people that are consuming that for 50%, that's maybe 9-10 minutes. So those
Yeah.
people now would be more apt to probably buy in to the workshop. So you're
Yeah, that
building
makes
this up,
sense.
pretty inexpensively. But now, would that same thing work if we could, flip it and then maybe even just use segments from the podcast and then, bring your listeners over? Or would it be better just to kind of do what we're talking about and then people are automatically introduced to you and then they want to go over and kind of, if they're listening to the podcast, they might look for you, but you don't actually tell them to. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm on the
that's a
fence.
challenging one.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
you got to test it out and let us know what happens.
well, I was going to say, so what are you actively doing right now? You've gotten over 7+ years. You've been doing this one a week, right?
Yeah, one a week usually.
One a week. Number one, what have you done other than just show up and, broadcast it? What have you done to bring attention to your podcast?
So a couple things. In the very early days, I had an email list of 11 people, which was entirely friends and family. So I was like, all right, here's my audience. Let's launch. But what I did have, and what, even if you're in the same boat when you don't have, a built-in audience, you
Sure.
do have, this Gmail archive history of everybody you've corresponded with over the last 10, 15 years. You do have, I think the average number of Facebook connection, 230 something Facebook friends. You've got your LinkedIn network. And there's some overlap between those two. But what I did was open up Gmail, open up a new compose window and just start typing letters like A and seeing what the auto suggest would like pop up. Like, oh, Aaron. Oh, I haven't
Yeah.
emailed Aaron in a while. Hey, Aaron, what's going on, man? I just started
Yeah.
this new podcast. You don't even have to listen to it, but every download helps me. Here's the link to check it out. That was the language that I used at the time.
Nice.
Today, I would probably spin it with an ask first of it just what are you up to? Hey, what's new in the life? It's been a while since we caught up. What are you working on? And the reason for that is it's almost human nature to respond with some reciprocity. Here's what I'm working
Mm.
on. What about you? And then that kind of opens up the gate to say, hey, well, since you asked, I'm working on this new project. I would love for you to check it out if it's something that you're interested in, or if you know anybody who might be, I would really appreciate if you could share it with them. And even if they don't listen, even if they don't take action, it plants that seed for if and when conversation pops up in the future to say like, oh, the side hustle guy, like, oh yeah, that reminds me. And same thing like for, if you're starting a new freelance business, like, oh, I need somebody who
Mm.
does web design for real estate agents or, some whatever random
Yeah.
niche. But you have to kind of tell people what you do. And I think
Mm.
that what I found in those early days of iTunes and Apple Podcasts was like, if you can give the algorithm a little bit of a nudge, right? You could provide your own outside marketing muscle just a little bit, and the algorithms kind of start to work in your favor. And I've seen the same thing on Amazon, like with my self-publishing stuff. We've
Sure.
seen the same stuff on Udemy and some of these other kind of mini buy buttons platforms.
Mm. Yeah, you bring up a great point with giving it a little bit more muscle. And I think that goes for any platform. Like you said, if you can drive outside traffic to a channel, you would think that that channel is going to like that. And they're going to be like, hey, let's give these guys a little bit more love. They're helping us out. You would hope it would work that way, but it will spike that algorithm, like you said. I'm curious, what's your thoughts on what do you think these days are driving your podcast being more visible? And I think more so than people searching. I agree with you. I don't think people are going there like, how to start a brand, like, I don't think that. I think it's coming from them listening to a podcast and seeing related shows. I think that's a bigger opportunity than for people searching. So
Yeah,
what?
that's an interesting. Like, so Spotify or whoever might recognize, like, oh, listeners who listen to this might also listen to that.
Yes.
No, I think that's probably true.
Yeah, because then they're giving you the recommendation, and then it's like, oh, that audience is very similar to this audience. You might like this. So I like that side of it. But what are you seeing that allows you more visibility? What's your guess, I guess? Cause we don't know. I wish we did,
Yeah.
but, well, I kind of don't wish we did, because then everybody would be, kind of hacking it and then trying to manipulate it, and then it wouldn't be fair. But like, what is it more reviews? Is it getting more downloads every day? Is it getting subscribes? Like, what do you think it is?
So I think I have a couple advantages that maybe another host does. Well, one, anybody can do. The
Yeah.
first is, trying to put the listener front and center, and thinking of like that, what's in it for me, like in the title of the episode. And so, because that's what got me hooked on podcasting as a listener early on. I followed a link from Twitter or something, and I land on this page and there's nothing here. And I see the little like player app up at the top, and I was like, oh, it's audio. It's a pot. You whatever you promised in that headline, and I don't even remember what it was, but like you buried
Yeah.
that 40 minutes deep into this MP3 file, and like
Yeah.
now I got to figure out how to like pre-smartphone get it onto my device, and it was I was not happy at that point, but
Yeah.
it was compelling enough that I was willing to go through those hoops. And I think for a lot of podcasts, it's the same way. It's like there's a hurdle to getting this onto your device, and it's becoming easier, but to take somebody from a stranger to a listener is a big first step. And so it's got to be really compelling. And so I learned that early on. I think episode number 5 was with this guy who I had connected with through Fiverr. So he's freelancing on Fiverr, and his claim to fame was he earned enough money on Fiverr in his first year to buy a house. And I was like, that's the hook. That's the title for
Yeah.
the episode. Because I was
Yeah.
like, what could you possibly be selling for $5 that you would earn this much money? And he was like, Nick, it's all about the upsells. It's like, okay, I should have known that. But trying to be conscious of that, like when creating episode titles, especially for the search engine, like, there's got to be curiosity inducing and make somebody want to click that download button and make it worthwhile for them. And then of course you got to deliver on that. So it can't be too clickbaity. The second thing that I think has really helped the Side Hustle Show in particular is I feel like I've got a pretty strong SEO game where I can rank in Google for a lot of, broad, make extra money, side hustle related topics. And in those posts, I'll reference guests on the show or reference episodes on the show. So there's this steady stream of new traffic, organic traffic that's coming in. And, maybe they don't listen right away, but they're like, oh, there's a podcast related to this. And so I think, having that multimedia element probably helps in Google and probably helps establish expertise and authority. And it's just, it's like, hey, there's more to this than just the text on the page. And so I think that it drives I have no way to measure it, but I imagine that drives a relatively steady stream of new people coming in the door.
Yeah. So yeah, actually you bring up a really good point. And that's something I have lacked over the years. I've did okay, but I could have done a lot better. And that's with the SEO game. So how much thought for you has gone into creating an episode and looking at something that could be ranking? Do you look even at that level, or you're just like, I know that this title is going to get people's attention? Or do you go, you know what, if I throw in how to make money on Fiverr, like that's going to get certain searches and that's going to be optimized for that? How deep do you go with that?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's almost 2 different games that you have to play or have to balance. One is that, curiosity inducing what's in it for me. And it's similar to, YouTube, right? It's like, I want to capture some search intent, but I also want to make the title like, just have enough of a question mark in my mind to like, well, I want to check out this one. Like, how to tie your shoes. You'll never believe this, or why you've been doing it wrong your whole life or something, there's examples that you might see on YouTube. So in the podcast directory, is that more curiosity inducing title? And then for the blog, if I end up writing like for the show notes, kind of this full in-depth summary or blog post version of that, that'll be the more SEO keyword optimized version. So we had Brian Scudamore from 1-800-GOT-JUNK, and I forget what the podcast title was. It was probably something like, $1 million a day hauling junk or something. Because he was like, through the franchise model had grown like crazy. But on the blog, it was like how to start a junk hauling business. So it was like more keyword focused at the front of the title.
Got it. So sometimes your title on the podcast could be different than the one on the show notes page.
Right.
Right. Okay, good. I'm taking notes. This is good. This is good. Are you writing your notes? Or are you having them done?
I'm having them done. I've had a guy
Okay.
who's been doing it for years.
Okay. I didn't know. I for some reason I thought you would have been that guy that would have been like, I got to do it myself because you want to get in there. You just, I could see you're kind of like, you got this mind that just kind of, I think on that side, the technical side, I look at you and I'm like, he's probably really good at SEO.
I've learned, it's something that I've learned because I wrote 1,000 posts before I ever paid any attention to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like the, bunch of monkeys in the room with the typewriters, like
Yep.
every now and again you had a lucky hit. And it
Yep.
was like, why do some of the articles that you create get this consistent evergreen traffic, and others, it's flash in the pan. You send it out to your email list, you get this little bump from the people who might be subscribed in Feedly, and then it's done. And so for a lot of years, I kind of neglected writing because it was depressing in a way. Like I felt like, why am I putting all this effort? I could put the same effort into producing an episode of the podcast and reach 10 times more people. Right. And so studying the SEO stuff, particularly from folks like Robert Farrington from The College Investor, Deacon Hayes from Well Kept Wallet, like a lot of people in the FinCon personal finance space, and studying how their businesses work. I don't know. I've learned a ton from that over the years, like creating content with search intent rather than just, all right, what do we want to write about today? It's like, okay, well, you could work that stuff in, but make sure it's, at least giving yourself a fighting chance of making it beyond that flash in the pan. It's like, if you can create an asset, and think of articles as assets, that comes from a conversation with Matt Giovanisi from Money Lab. I love all of his stuff. And it's like, this article is an annuity. Yes, it's going to take some time and effort and maybe investment to create if you're hiring writers. But if you do it right and it can stick on the first page, it's something that can drive traffic, leads, income for months, years at a time. It's really cool.
Yeah, I had Matt on the show. He's it's a Swim University, right?
Yes.
Yeah. He's great. Yeah, I mean, he's got his SEO game down. That's for sure. He knows what he's doing. But yeah, really good guy. I learned a lot from him, and I admire what he's done. But you're right. You're creating that asset, no matter what platform you're on, really. If it's a search platform, even Pinterest, Pinterest, yeah. That's a search platform that you build an asset that could be there and keep generating traffic. That's why I tell people, like, I'm not a huge fan of like Instagrams and the Snapchats and all that stuff. Is that a feeder? Yes. Is it worth my time? I don't want to give myself that bandwidth responsibility. So I'm like, it's just a hamster wheel that you can't get off. The other one, it's like, put a time, effort, it sits there, it gets found, you continually benefit from it. So I like that.
Yeah. And I see the same thing with YouTube. Even random videos that I created years ago, like, are still getting views, are still racking up ad dollars. And it feels like it's the most passive income in the world. And it's just like, it's kind of addicting. And it's like, okay, yeah, that took a little bit of effort to create that video, but then it just sits out there and it just is this little digital asset, like a digital like minion going out into the world doing your bidding. And it's like, okay, I should spend more time creating more of those. Like, on the one hand, it's fun. And on the other hand, it's kind of helpful and rewarding too.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let's go back in time just a little bit and let's talk about like what it's been like since you started. And when you started the podcast, what was your vision? Where did you think it was going to go? Where were you hoping it was going to go?
Oh my gosh, I had no vision, Scott. I started a podcast out of peer pressure more than anything else. I thought of myself first and foremost as a writer, and the Pat Flynn's of the world that I was paying attention to were like, hey, podcasting is the next big thing. You want to have a personal brand, you got to have a podcast. It was either that or YouTube. And so those were the two choices. I was like, oh, I definitely don't want to do YouTube. I definitely don't want to do video. So podcasting was literally the lesser of two evils. And it was something that I knew nothing about. And so people who say, well, start a business around your passion, like, it's almost impossible to do that. Because you're like, how could I have been passionate about podcasting? It's like, it's something I'm definitely passionate about 7 years later after having done the work and put in the reps. But at the onset, no, I had no idea like the mechanics of how it worked. it was $15 a month for media hosting, which was something I didn't, budget for, wasn't really prepared for that. Had it been 25 or 30, like, I don't know if I would have signed up. Like, what am I committing myself to? I was kind of nervous of like, well, am I going to be able to find guests? How long am I going to keep this stuff going? And over the course of the first, 6 or 12 months, I found it was something that I really did enjoy doing, even if it wasn't making any money at that time. It was just,
Yeah.
and looking at the download chart, relatively speaking, hardly anybody was listening to, but there was just enough traction to say, okay, I think there's something here. On top of that, it's really rewarding to have these conversations and try and source these stories. And so it's something that I felt good about continuing.
What was the start though also, like, where did you go with the side hustle thing? Because that's what you were kind of working on. You're like, I want to come up with some different ways that I could create some side hustle.
I mean, that was my entrepreneurial experience and background prior to that. So I was working corporate, and it was a comparison shoe shopping website. That was like my escape path, totally random niche. But yeah, it would pull in the catalogs from Zappos and Amazon and all these other stores and tell you where you could find the best price on your next pair of shoes. So that was a vehicle that let me quit my corporate job, and ran that for years and years and years. And it was probably 5 years later, after doing that as mainly the main focus, I was like, oh, let's start up this little blog and podcast on the side and see what happens.
So basically it was then you saying like, okay, I've done this thing for 4 or 5 years, pretty successfully as a side hustle. So maybe I should start a podcast on how to create your own side hustle. Was that kind
right?
of
I mean, you go through kind of the it's kind of at a low point in that business where, and to be fair, like started half a dozen projects on the side from this shoe business, and most of those, died a quiet death in the corner of the internet. But a couple lived on. The side hustle show was one. There was another site that I sold recently. It was called Virtual Assistant was another one. Actually started out, even before Side Hustle Nation, and it was just trying to. It was going through kind of this like soul searching of like, well, what do you want to be known for? What do you want people to find when somebody Googles you? What do you never get tired about talking about? And had this personal blog at the time, and people would send me, I say people, like 2 people would send me these like random businesses they would find. And like, how does this business work? Like, could you deconstruct this? Like, where does the money come from? Because I would write stuff like, how does restaurant.com work? Which I think is still on the first page of Google, like, almost 10 years later. How does Southwest Business Select work? Like, oh, wait, there's no business class on Southwest. This is like a giant money printing scheme, and good on them. Good on them for figuring out, the 80-20 of their customers and how much they're willing to pay. So deconstructing like how these different businesses worked was fascinating for me. And, now 7 years later, 8 years later, to have a job that lets me do that, like, oh, I get to call somebody up and be like, wait a minute. Where's the traffic coming from? What's the monetization model on that? How does that work? And be able to have those conversations and share that stuff. It's like a dream job for me.
So what's really interesting and really cool actually is that you were able to start this thing to give people ideas of different side hustles. So that way maybe one of them will, spark an interest, and they're like, I could do that. I don't want to sell stuff on eBay, but I could sell stuff on Etsy or whatever, right? You're giving people, or I could flip stuff, or I could, whatever. I could do rebate stuff online and, whatever, or I could coupon clip or whatever it is, right? You're doing all these different ones. But what's really interesting is like, you don't have one model, right? Like the way I look at it is like, for me, because this is what I enjoy and this is what I do and what I've done, is like brand building. What's it come down to? Website, email list, content.
Yeah.
Like so, but yours is really kind of allows you to be free in a sense, to where you're more or less a reporter in a sense that says, I'm going to go out and find all these side hustle ideas. We're going to dig in. We're going to see what's good, what's not good, who it's for, who it's not for. And then you guys make the decision. Is that kind of like where you're at even to this day?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, early on, the vision was like, okay, I'll be the guinea pig. I'll go out and test a bunch of this stuff. And that's like in the early days, it was like, I'll sell stuff on eBay. I'll do some freelancing. Let me try some self-publishing. I'll put up an online course over here. We'll see what happens. And, report back on the results. And like those types of case study posts were awesome. It was like how I got on the first page of Fiverr or the homepage of Fiverr and made $1,000 in 4 days. It's like
Right.
kind of fun stuff like that.
Sure.
But again, it's kind of like flash in the pan type of content. And so it's transitioned over the years as the Side Hustle Nation community has grown to more of that journalist role. So if I just finding interesting stories, mostly from within the community now, and reporting back on those.
Yeah, that's it. It actually does it take some of the pressure off of you, in a sense.
It does, but man, there's been some episodes that have had a little bit of controversy, and so it's like,
can we talk about any of those?
Well, we did an episode last spring on trading stocks, which did not go over well.
I can see where that's going. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Tell me more.
So this was kind of recorded. It was recorded a little bit in advance, but of course the market had just dipped 30%, and this woman had, pretty high priced course that she was selling on the back end, and she was using podcasting as part of her marketing strategy. Okay, that's fair. I'm fine with that. And I'm like, look, if people can learn how to flip sleep number beds profitably, people can learn to trade stocks profitably. Like I'm open to that idea, even though I've drank the, buy and hold Kool-Aid my whole life, index funds, just, VTSAX and chill or whatever the choose FI, kind of the financial independence model is.
Yeah.
And so that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. It was a really controversial episode, and I definitely lost a lot of sleep over there and lost appetite for a few days. Cause I'm kind of allergic to that stuff. Like I want to be, I did my best to kind of play the skeptic on here. Like, well, 90% of active traders lose money. Like what makes you so special? What makes you so different? And I mean, she had the screenshots of her account that she shared to kind of back up her claims. And we had, a few dozen mutual friends from the FinCon community. But man, it was kind of a rough few weeks while that kind of all blew over.
Now, what do you do with that episode? Do you leave it? Do you pull it?
Yeah, it's still up there.
Okay. I was just curious. I had an episode probably about
now if it came out, and I've heard from some of her students that have taken the course and they're seeing good results, and so I was confident enough that she wasn't just trying to sell snake oil. But if something did come out down the road, and same thing with any guest, if something really, really bad comes out down the road, I try to do a decent amount of due diligence in advance, especially for something like that. And couldn't find any, negative dirt. So I was like, all right, let's roll with it. But yeah, I was not particularly well received.
That's crazy. I had an episode probably a couple of years now, and it's maybe a year and a half-ish. Maybe it was 2 years. But anyway, it was on Amazon. It was on Amazon inventory tax. So up until that point, and there was rules and regulations with it, but you couldn't write off your inventory until it's been sold, right? Because it's you bought it, but you didn't sell it, so you can't take the deduction.
Sure.
Then there was a law passed for certain individuals that met certain criteria that you could write off your inventory. So if you bought 20 grand in inventory, you could write it right off. You wouldn't have to wait, but then there's going to have to be well, then you can't write it off on this. So it was a whole mess, right? But a CPA came on, actually, one that I know and I've used in the past. And he gave it as soon as it was announced, he came on and we talked about it because it was big news. And
was this Josh?
Oh my God. Yeah, Josh. And this thing just blew up, and I started getting nervous. I'm like, is this bad advice? Do we not know enough yet? Should I have even announced this yet and stuff? So then we did an update. So I literally spliced in. I took that episode. Now, if someone had already downloaded it, they were going to have it, but then I spliced in the beginning. I'm just letting you know before you listen to this, there could be updates and news that you should pay attention to. So make sure you contact your CPA to find out what the current laws and regulations are. But in the meantime, listen to this episode. So I kind of made a cut there because I was like, I don't want this coming back later and people saying, well, he said, and I'm like, no,
Yeah, this does not constitute financial or legal advice.
No. No.
My friend is a personal trainer, and that's kind of at the top of his show. You know, these are the certifications that he has.
Yes.
He's got this, and this, but he is not a doctor. You know, please consult your physician. Do not
You
sue
have
us,
to. Yeah.
and
You
continue.
have to do that stuff. But okay. So you've grown quite a nice community as well, Facebook community, and just, you know, your Side Hustle Nation. And you said now it's probably becoming easier for you to even find content, because now your guests kind of come to you from within the community, and now you can kind of pick and choose who you want to have come on the show. What kind of meets the criteria for you these days?
The best performing episodes for me are the ones that the business models that someone shares that are low barrier to entry, that are relatable, that are repeatable. So stuff like kind of and sometimes in surprising niches. So we had a guy who was doing like knife sharpening locally. He's like,
Okay.
yeah, I kind of taught myself how to do this on YouTube, bought the kit on Amazon, and now
Nice.
he was doing like thousands of dollars a month worth of knife sharpening. It's like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
We had a woman who was doing like pooper scooper, like a pet waste
Oh
removal
yeah.
business
Oh
locally, like
yeah.
low barrier to entry. You know, anybody can go out and do this if you're willing to do the work. And she had kind of grown and scaled it now, where she had other people out on the route for her. So stuff like that does well. Or or it's like the crazy you know, online business type of case study where it's like, I started this blog a year ago and now it's making 20 grand a month. Those always
Yeah.
do really well, because it's like, wait a minute, how did you
Yeah.
shortcut this thing? I would have told you blogging was dead, you know, 10 years
Yeah.
ago, but now you're coming in and disproving that. So that
Yeah.
one, those type of do well. Or you know, deconstructing a specific marketing tactic, like, oh, here's how I generate freelance leads from YouTube, and here's my you know, here's my keyword research process, here's how I structure the videos, here's my call to action. That type of stuff does well. Here's how I drive traffic and leads from Pinterest. You know, if you have a specific marketing tactic to share, that that usually does pretty well too.
Yeah, I can imagine. But that, yeah, that's, again, if you can find someone in your audience is looking for side hustle, right? They're not even looking for full time, although some could turn it into a full time. They're just thinking, I want to do something on the side. I mean, again, the pooper scooper thing, knife sharpening, like any type of service type business like that, I think is a huge opportunity right now. And people are so willing to pay for weekly or monthly maintenance in a sense. Like I just seen literally out of my neighborhood, there was a truck that came to someone's house with a water unit on there and washed their car in their driveway because they didn't want to go get it washed somewhere else. Like
Yeah.
washed it in their driveway, cleaned it out, probably charged them 100, 150 bucks, and they're paying it. Right. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
I
we had
mean,
a mobile detailing guy, actually a
yeah,
college student, and his brother were doing this mobile detailing business.
yeah.
And what he said that was interesting was, like, for most of his customers, it's their first time ever getting a car detailed. And that was kind of like, oh, the light bulb goes off. Like, this is a growing market, right? You're not going out
Mm,
trying to conquest market share from some other service provider. The pie just
right.
keeps getting bigger. And I think that's the case
Yeah.
in a lot of these type of local service businesses, like homeowners. Somebody gave me the stat, Nick Huber from Sweaty Startup gave me the stat, like 20 years ago, 5% of homeowners outsourced their lawn care. Like, how I'll hire somebody to mow my lawn. Today is like 40%. And so he's like, the
Oh
pie
yeah.
just keeps getting bigger. I don't want to deal with this. I have limited
Yeah.
spare time. I got people for that.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and it's an opportunity, right, for side hustle people, you know, that want to create that. And that's when people say, "I don't have enough money to start my business." Well, number one, it doesn't take a lot to start if you're starting with a website, some hosting, you know, maybe even Etsy, and you're doing print on demand, like whatever. It's not much to start. If you're starting physical products, it's going to be more. But even if it did cost you a few $1,000s to start a business, go on out and do some stuff like that. You'll make that 3,000 on these side hustle stuff, or just go listen to your podcast, and you'll figure out a few different ways to probably make that $3,000. You know? So, all right, we're going to wrap this up, but what I want to do is I want to hear a little bit of what is the plan moving forward for your podcast and kind of like, you know, your next 15 million downloads. Like what's the
Then
plan? What's on the horizon?
the next 15 million, man, it's like, I've kind of, you start to think like, am I going to do another 400 of these episodes? I mean, you're closing in on 1,000. You know, how long does this go? And it's kind of like,
Yeah.
well, as long as it's still fun and interesting to source these
Yeah.
stories, like, it's, you know, it's a labor of love for sure. What's next? So this year I've been playing around with creating episode specific lead magnets again. This is something that I started doing in 2014 and really was an inflection point for the business and for the podcast. I went from, a little over a year deep into the show with 1,000 email subscribers. Within 3 months of doing this, it was 3,000. Within 6 months, it was 6,000. Within 12 months, it was 12,000. So it was just like this huge jumping off point for the show and for the audience. But kind of got away from doing that in favor of this SEO strategy, where I was like, well, I'll just publish the show notes on the website. It's better for user experience and all that jazz. So I've been playing around this year with getting back to doing that, but not in the same way that I was before. So what I was doing before was like, hey, download the episode summary. Here's the highlight reel. You're out walking the dog. You're at the gym. You're driving in your car. You're not in a great place to take notes. Don't worry, we did it for you. You can download them at this URL. And that worked really well for a lot of years, but kind of got away from that. So instead, trying to create something that's complementary. So we had a guy who was had a portable hot tub rental business, which I thought was awesome, fascinating business.
Great.
And so I was like, well, if you are interested, here's a list of 25 other unconventional, things that you could rent out. It had, links to external sources and sometimes, past guests on the show who had done everything from bounce houses to semi trucks to, and so trying to create something that's complementary, that somebody listening in might be interested in to learn more, to take the next step. We had a woman who kind of described her Facebook marketing funnel from page to group to, kind of entry product to membership community. It was like, okay, this is all great, but you've heard it described in audio. If you want the visualization where you can fill in kind of the fill in the blanks for your own business, you can go download that here. And so that's been working pretty well so far this year. So I'll probably keep that going and see where that goes. But yeah, getting more serious about the email.
How does that work real quick? I just want to ask you on that. So, cause I did that a while ago as well, where the show notes page would have its own opt-in in a sense.
Yeah.
And it wasn't bad, but yet, do you just dump them all on the same list, or are you segmenting them? I could see that getting really messy if you're segmenting and then having this, okay, who do I send the email to, who I don't send the email to? How are you balancing all of that segmentation stuff?
So the welcome sequence is segmented, depending on what it is. And there's only a few, I've got a handful of these, around investing, around blogging or online business, around freelancing. And so there's a few different paths that somebody could go down based on what they opted in for. And then beyond that, it's just, one master list. And occasionally if there's a specific offer or something that would not be relevant to e-commerce sellers or whatever, I can exclude those people.
Got it. Okay. And who are you using for your email provider these days?
That's through ActiveCampaign and using lead pages to, do this file delivery.
Got it. And then, and I'm assuming you're having someone create your lead magnets for each episode.
Yeah. So I've been doing some of that myself and doing some of that through my assistant.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a great idea. I think if you have something that's not just the show notes, but have something like a little step-by-step guide or a flow chart or something like that, I think that could definitely work. It is that extra element, but is like, does it, yield having more subscribers, which leads to more listeners and all of that stuff. So
yeah, because I mean, my list has been flat, or had been flat for probably 3 years because I kept deleting people. If this person isn't opening, I don't want this dead weight. It's hurting my open rate, it's hurting my deliverability. And a couple of things have kind of shifted there. One was I have an automation that says after 5 months or 6 months of not opening anything, it says, hey, you still side hustling, Scott? What's going on? I haven't heard from you in a while. And it's just like a 2-line email. It looks more personalized than a regular newsletter. And other people be like, yeah, dude, I open this every week, or maybe it's through Outlook Previewer, or maybe I've got an ad blocker or something that's blocking the little pixel. And so I was like, shoot, did I, how many thousands of people have I deleted over that were actually still active subscribers? So that made me a little bit nervous. So testing different things to encourage opens and engagement, and playing around with link tracking, which I had turned off for a while because it added another redirect layer that some browsers were choking on or some users were complaining about. But playing around with that stuff, it's been it's been fun. Actually, one recent test, and this is probably too early to tell, but was resending to non-openers, like broadcast message. So my broadcasts go out on Thursday. On Saturday, I resent to everybody who didn't open, change the subject line, change the first few lines of this email. Hey, just wanted to make sure you saw this. And because it was leading with the lead magnet from the episode, it was like a giving first email. Hey, created this extra thing. It's a bonus for you as a subscriber. You click, just want to make sure you saw it. And that had another like 15% open rate or something on that from people who ignored the Thursday message. So I was like, that's, for me, that was like 7,500 people. Like that was, a significant increase in engagement.
That's huge. I do that a lot now, and ConvertKit makes it super easy. I use ConvertKit now. I went from Aweber to Infusionsoft to ClickFunnels with SendGrid, then ActiveCampaign, and now I'm on ConvertKit. I'm just going to stay there.
The migration process is such a pain, especially if you got dozens and dozens of different forms.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I do that as well. Like, so I send an email Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right along with the podcast, but I don't always announce the podcast. I just talk about whatever. And, I should probably promote the podcast more in there. But I always do that. I do it the following morning. So like if I send out the email at 8 o'clock in the morning, the following day, I'll do the same thing. And you're right. I'll get anywhere from 8 to 10% every single week on the unopens. But the other thing that I do is in ConvertKit, they have a filter that's built right in that says, so if you're sending it to the whole list, it'll say exclude cold. And so those cold people automatically will not be sent that. So your open rates and your click-through rates will be higher than if you send it to your entire list. And then I send dedicated one, the same email to the cold list. And then anybody that opens from that will automatically get added to your warm list because now they've opened it and stuff. So
yeah. Okay. I do something similar where I send those an hour apart. Send to the warm audience first, hopefully send like warm fuzzy signals to Gmail and other email providers, and then send to everybody else. Cause you shoot like a, 40-50% open rate on that first message. Yeah. And then, okay, this is a relevant thing. I don't know. It's their algorithms are probably more sophisticated than that, but in theory, I saw, when I first tested that, I did see a bump from doing it that way.
Yeah, it's definitely worth sending to the unopens for sure. But I'm always thinking of that too. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this, the cold audience, like, are they even interested anymore? And, I have done the kind of like, hey, are you still interested kind of thing? And, but now that you bring that up, that sometimes people are getting it, but they're not actually, they're getting it, but they're being seen as like, they're not getting it.
Yeah.
We don't want to exclude them and not be able to send them emails anymore because we look at the data there, but we also don't want drag around dead weight because it's expensive and it also hurts your deliverability. So anyway, Nick, we could go on and geek out about that. I think the one thing that I did learn is that we cannot wait so long. So we got to get you back on and catch up, maybe even just once a year. I mean, it's the only way we can catch up.
Don't need to wait another 500-600 episodes.
Oh my gosh. But hey, let everyone know a little bit more about where they can find the podcast and find out, everything else that you guys are up to over there. It's Side Hustle Nation. Go ahead. Let everybody know.
Yeah, you bet. Of course, we'd love to have you tune into the Side Hustle Show. There's, 400 episodes like we talked about with Scott, breaking down different business ideas, different business models, ways to make extra money. I am constantly amazed and inspired by all the creative ways that people are getting it done. You can find that at sidehustlenation.com or in any of your favorite podcast apps.
Awesome. Well, hey, Nick, thank you so much, man. And keep doing what you're doing. Looks like you're having fun. You're helping people. And just keep doing it, man. You're rocking and rolling over there. So, hey, I just want to say thanks again. I appreciate you. And we'll definitely get you back on, man.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, there you have it. I wasn't kidding, right? What a great guy. Love Nick. And Nick admits that he's an introvert. He is someone that doesn't necessarily like being front and center. And he's pushed himself through that. And a good thing he did because he's got a great community now. He's helped thousands of people, millions of downloads. He loves going to live events when we can go to live events. But it just goes to show you that sometimes you got to push yourself. Sometimes you gotta do the things that aren't that comfortable. And you also have to commit to doing something even though you might not be seeing the results in the beginning. And if you listened to the entire episode, which I hope that you did, you heard him say in the very beginning, the numbers are low. You're not getting many listens. You might have a few friends and family listening or reading your blog, and that's okay. We need to stay consistent. We need to commit to it and just show up. And that is the big takeaway for me here, and hopefully for you as well. All right, so again, the show notes can be found at brandcreators.com/948. Head on over there. You can watch the interview if you want with me and Nick. And just check out Nick's stuff. He's a great guy, knows what he's doing, and he's interviewed a lot of people that have made money online, and some of them went on to be full-time. Some of them are just side hustling. So definitely check out what Nick has to offer. All right, guys, so that's it. That's going to wrap it up. As always, remember, I'm here for you. I believe in you, and I am rooting for you. But you have to, come on, say it with me. Say it loud. Say it proud. Take action. Have an awesome, amazing day, and I'll see you right back here on the next episode. Now let's rock your brand.